In this corridor, we have a look at the influences on Gilbert White's life globally. Gilbert White didn't travel very much. He got horrendously coach sick, but also just wasn't offered the opportunities to travel very much. However, he was a great correspondent and a fantastic reader. He read the works of other naturalists who lived all around Europe and gained knowledge from their experiences. He was in contact with explorers, travel writers, and people that had worldly insights. He even had a brother who lived in Gibraltar, which was very helpful when discussing things like migration. So in this corridor, we have a look at some of those people who informed Gilbert White's global opinion. Gilbert White's brother John became chaplain to the garrison in Gibraltar in 1756. John was also interested in natural history, and in the late 1760s, Gilbert began to quiz his younger brother on a topic that was occupying his mind back in Selborne: migration. John was able to confirm sightings of British-dwelling birds passing through the skies on their way to and from Africa. John would also send Gilbert specimens from Gibraltar, which would not always survive the journey. As John's interest in natural history increased, he started to write a natural history of Gibraltar, with lots of advice and tips from his elder brother in Selborne. Unfortunately, it was never published and is now lost, but there is a section of it which can be found in Gilbert's The Natural History of Selborne. Linnaeus was a Swedish botanist, zoologist and physician who formalised the modern system of naming organisms. All 18th century naturalists, including White, were influenced by Linnaeus. In fact, White references him in The Natural History of Selborne 32 times. White was not in direct written contact with Linnaeus, but discussed many topics with him through his brother John, who did seem to be in contact with the great naturalist. Gilbert White writes in 1772, "When I came to town, I found a long letter from Linnaeus to my brother John lying in Fleet Street, occasioned by an epistle and some files of insects sent by the latter to the former. The old arch-naturalist writes with spirit still, and is very open and communicative, acknowledging that there are several of the insects which were new to him." Brisson was a French zoologist and natural philosopher. For a period of time, Brisson was the instructor of physical sciences and natural history to the French royal family. White references Brisson in The Natural History of Selborne and had clearly read his work. Scopoli was an Austrian physician and naturalist. During his life, Scopoli travelled around Europe, where he worked in the fields of chemistry and natural history and published several works during his lifetime. Scopoli corresponded with Linnaeus, and the two naturalists seem to have shown a great amount of interest in each other's work. White references Scopoli 15 times in The Natural History of Selborne. Sir Joseph Banks was an English naturalist, botanist and patron of the natural sciences. He held the position of President of the Royal Society for over 41 years. Banks made his name on the 1766 natural history expedition to Newfoundland and to Labrador. He took part in Captain James Cook's first voyage, visiting Brazil, Tahiti, New Zealand and Australia, returning to immediate fame. He is credited with bringing 30,000 plant specimens home with him. Amongst them, he discovered 1,400. Around 80 species of plant bear his name. Gilbert White was in written contact with Joseph Banks and had hoped that they might meet in person here in Selborne. White followed Banks's travels closely and celebrated his safe return. Banks and White had many mutual friends. Dr. Daniel Solander was a Swedish naturalist who began cataloguing the natural history collections of the British Museum and was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society. In 1768, Solander gained leave of absence from the British Museum and embarked on Captain James Cook's first voyage to the Pacific Ocean on board the Endeavour with Joseph Banks. He, along with Banks, is one of the botanists that Botanist's Bay, which later became Botany Bay, was named after. Gilbert White does not seem to have been in direct contact with Solander, but they had many mutual friends, including Gilbert's lifelong friend, John Mulso.